And I'm Ben Warner. I lead product marketing at Privado AI. And today we'll be talking with Stacy Feuer from ESRB Privacy Certified and our CEO, Vaibhav Antil. We'll be talking about the top web and app privacy risks today and how ESRB leverages automated audits to certify their member companies to tackle some of these web and app privacy risks. Just a few housekeeping items. This session will be recorded. The recording was sent out after today's session. We will also send out the slides. And please do ask questions. So we will be monitoring the Q&A, so please submit them there. We'll try to answer them during the session. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the very end. But yeah, without further ado, I will pass it over to Stacy and Vaibhav to introduce themselves.
Awesome. I'll go first and then I'll pass it over to Stacy. Hey everyone, I'm Vaibhav Antil. I'm the founder and CEO of Privado AI. Privado, for folks who don't know, is as a company, we help automate privacy compliance for GDPR, CCPA. We have a host of product, but what we have really done is utilize a lot of AI-based scanning, agent technology to automate a lot of manual efforts that privacy professionals have to do. A big portion of that currently over the last 12 months has been in auditing their websites and mobile apps. So we have offerings there. We will demo some of them during the webinar as well. My background is in product and technology, and then I moved over to privacy. So been an interesting 4.5, 5 years journey. And I'm super excited to have Stacy with me on the webinar. And over to you, Stacy, for your introduction.
Great. Well, I'm really excited to be here to speak to all of you about ESRB Privacy Certified and the work we've been doing with Privado over the last year. So I am the Senior Vice President at ESRB Privacy Certified, and we can probably move to the next slide, V, because I can combine the introduction of myself with the introduction to ESRB. So the ESRB, as many of you may know, is the self-regulatory organization for the video game industry in the United States. It was started in 1994, so we have a 30-year plus history, and most people know us from the ESRB age and content ratings for video games, which you can see right here in this slide. The ESRB does a number of things. In addition to the ratings, though, we enforce an industry-adopted code of advertising. We have retailer support, and we do a lot of consumer and parent education. What my division does, ESRB Privacy Certified, is privacy compliance. We are a member-based organization. So video game companies, as well as toy companies and other companies that provide adjacent services to video game and toy companies, come to us for privacy compliance and certification. We have 2 seals, and perhaps we can move on to the next slide, which are our general seal requirements and our kids seal requirements. For the kids seal, and you're looking at our seals now, which you can find on our website. And by the way, if you go to the website, there are very detailed FAQs about each seal and what they mean and how we do our certifications and compliance work. But for the kids seal in particular, we are one of 6 organizations certified by the FTC as a COPPA Safe Harbor organization. What that means is that if you comply with the program requirements that underline our kids seal, you are deemed to be in compliance with the FTC's COPPA rule and the COPPA Act. Now, that doesn't mean that you can never be investigated if you are a member of a COPPA Safe Harbor program in good standing, but it means that the general presumption is that if you're following our guidelines, you are in compliance with the law. There's been a lot going on in the last year or last few years with privacy, as I think all of you know, And so recently we've updated our program requirements for both our Privacy Certified seal, which is our general seal, and our Kids Certified seal. So the the right now, the general seal requirements, which are in effect, map to a variety of laws, including some of the state laws that V mentioned, as well as general privacy principles drawn from the FTC's enforcement actions and statements over the years. And our kids seal requirements are a mixture of COPPA as well as some additional sections that are derived from state laws. We've just submitted those to the FTC in October for their review and approval as required under the amended COPPA rule, and we're waiting to hear back on those, but I'll talk about them today. So what is it that we do? And very quickly, we, as I mentioned, are a compliance and certification organization. So our members who join us on an annual basis can submit products to us for certification. What are products? Products are everything from websites to mobile apps to connected toys, PC games, games streamed remotely under a games as a service model. And when you submit a product to us for certification, we do a very detailed assessment, everything from your privacy disclosures to your network traffic. We can talk a little bit more about certification, but once a product is certified, we have ongoing monitoring. We provide our members with biannual reports every year after certification on all of their certified products. We do a lot of spot checks and monitoring. And along with that, we provide global guidance on foreign laws. We provide input on best practices and compliance with platform rules. And we help our members essentially resolve or remediate the issues we identify in those initial and biannual and spot check assessments to come up with multiple pathways to resolve the issues that we flagged so that the member and their product remain in compliance with the underlying program requirements. So that's like the 10,000-foot, overview of what it is that we do. And we can talk a little bit more during the webinar, I'm sure, about how we do it and how we use Privado to help us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for Stacy for kind of introducing the work that you do at ESRB. We've been glad to partner with you in supporting some of those controls. And of course, in our team's experience, my experience, the controls are really thorough. Probably you run the most sophisticated audit across all our customers as well. So that's always exciting to work with you on pushing the boundaries on how much we can accomplish through automation. So what we thought as the next step in the webinar is we could spend the next, kind of 15-20 minutes talking about the main web and app risk, how the enforcement is changing, and then, utilize the second half of the webinar for Q&A, a little bit of demo, and we can show you how you can not only learn about the risk, but also kind of utilize technology like ours to find those risks and kind of remediate those risks as well. So to kick things off, I wanted to start, Stacy, with kind of what we've observed as the bigger risk, especially in the US front around global privacy control and opt-out. So just wanted to, hand it over back to you to give your high-level thoughts on what you've observed, either through all the news we've been hearing about fines or all the multi-state work that's happening around this issue.
Yeah, well, this slide that you put up definitely encapsulates some of the activity, although I think it would take about, 30 slides just to go over what's happened in the last few months. In terms of the kinds of issues that we see, as I mentioned earlier, when we conduct our reviews, we're looking at everything from our member companies' privacy disclosures to the configuration of age gates, to the presence of various tracking technologies and related opt-outs for a product that a member has submitted for certification. So our reviews are very thorough, and there are lots of different points where we identify issues, some are very technical, and I wouldn't say trivial or minor, but they're very technical. Some are more risky issues and issues that can attract regulators' attention or lead to liability. So I would say that some of the ways that we think about this really do map to this slide. So first of all, the presence of tracking technologies, whether it's cookies, web beacons, pixels, that are collecting information in ways that our member might not have even intended, sometimes even pulling in fourth parties, forget about the third parties, is definitely an issue that can lead to a lot of risk. There's also what we see, the unnecessary collection of sensitive data. That's something that we sometimes see in our members' products, particularly geolocation, which, as I'm sure a lot of people know, has been a big concern of both the FTC and state regulators over the past year. Another big issue, and you have this here on your slide, is misconfigured opt-outs or opt-outs that just don't work as represented, or they function in a way that really doesn't align with the consumer's reasonable expectations. We also see privacy information and privacy choices presented in a way that could be viewed as misleading at worst or buried at best. So that's another issue. And then, of course, because we have our kids seal requirements and we are looking at a lot of COPPA's technical requirements, some of the risky issues that we see are with misconfiguring age gates, or overly long retention periods for kids' data. So those are some of the top common high risks we see across our members. And what's interesting about it is the opaqueness of some of this, right? So sometimes we'll identify issues for members, and they're not even things that the member intended or knew about. And that's why we spend a lot of time looking at the back end, so to speak, to really understand what's going on, to use another cliche, under the hood.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And just to add a few things that we've observed over, working with you and other customers as well, like some of those are some of the issues that you pointed out also stem out of simple kind of misunderstandings or not really understandings what the intent was of the person who was setting the cookies or adding a script versus the legal team. I think one common one I've seen is miscategorizing cookies. So from an accountability perspective, what ends up happening is someone in marketing team deploys a script, that script sets a cookie, and then that cookie gets categorized. So a lot of times, third-party vendors are setting first-party cookies, which means when you look at the cookie, it looks like your own cookie. It's set as Privado AI's own cookies, but it's really set by like a pixel, like a Snap pixel or a TikTok pixel. And if you don't have that context, what ends up happening is that ends up being categorized as a strictly essential cookie. So in our practice, we do see a lot of miscategorization. If the cookies are miscategorized, then of course there are two, three downstream effects that have happened. One is on your disclosure, you have basically wrongly categorized. So if you were showing a cookie list, then actually our advertising or targeting cookie is being shown as strictly essential. Second is it also has an impact on blocking. So those, if your CMP uses that categorization to block it, your cookie banner uses that, then it won't get blocked as well. So that's like the most common one I've seen. This is also a place where you need that collaboration between the two teams and you need that alerting mechanism. So we've done quite a bit of work there. I think another one I've seen the most common one is a lot of focus has been on cookies and lately pixels uh, by the legal and the privacy teams, but it's really the entire, as Stacy, you mentioned, even in the certification, it's really the entire network traffic that you need to worry about. Because a lot of time, I mean, pixels were the thing, they were added that one by one image, but now at least on the third party front, tracking technology front, it's like literally the entire traffic you need to worry about. It gets added in multiple ways. It gets added sometimes as a tag through your tag manager. It gets added as a fourth party where you don't even have a contract with a vendor. So it's really looking at the full network traffic and doing that analysis. Where are we not complying with the state requirement or the global requirement? So I would say, like, from my perspective, I've seen those two. And then, yeah, like some of it is also in easier to fix. Like, for example, the opt-out mechanism is clearly set by the law, but some of the fines we saw, Stacy, were related to not following that as well, right? So some of it is actually possible to do. Some of it, yeah, requires a better collaboration, maybe a better visibility and tooling. So that's kind of what I've seen so far.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the miscategorized cookies, we do see that. And that is a big issue, as you said, because of the onward consequences of miscategorizing a cookie and how that affects opt-outs and on and on and on. I know that the New York Attorney General, I think it was last summer, not 25, but 24, put out some guidance on miscategorizing cookies and noted, I think the AG had looked at about 13 companies in a non-public sweep. And it seemed like that was a recurring issue across all of the companies that the AG's office looked at in that sweep. And the guidance basically said, clean it up, everybody. So, so there is a lot to do there. And as you said, it's sometimes more complicated because the marketing team might categorize the cookie, legal never looks at it. As a lawyer, I think it's probably good to have legal look at these things. Uh, but there's a lot of work that goes on with cookies and other tracking technologies.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of touched this topic when we were talking about like data collection, especially around location. I'm curious to kind of hear from you about anything you've heard more about. I know you do a lot of work around children's data, and when we were preparing for the webinar, you had some insights around that. So yeah, especially if you can like share some more insights around children's data, and then anything around other data types as well.
Yeah, obviously, sensitive data is what regulators are really concerned about. Not that they're not concerned about other things, but we call it sensitive data for a reason. The collection, use, and sharing of that data can have important and sometimes adverse consequences for consumers. Kids' data is often looked at as sensitive data under various state laws, certainly under COPPA, even though it's not called sensitive data, but there is a recognition that children's data does deserve special protections. That's the reason underlying the initial COPPA statute, which was passed in the late 90s, and in the most current iteration of the implementing COPPA rule, which came earlier this year. What we've seen this year is an intensifying focus on children's data. It's part of a larger concern that is not only about their privacy, but also about safety, sometimes about content, sometimes about advertising. So there are a whole bunch of issues that are bundled under the children's privacy category. We've seen many states either pass or amend their laws to deal with children's data. So we see everything from, on the one end, Arkansas passing its own COPPA 2.0, which is a bit of a misnomer, to states like Connecticut, Oregon, and Colorado amending their laws to provide additional protections for children's data. There's a lot of concern around the use of that data for targeted advertising, and that interest is only increasing. And essentially what I'm seeing is across the United States, the states are responding by both passing laws and bringing lawsuits to deal with children's data. And that is also reflected on the other side of the pond, because we've also seen a lot of issues around the collection, use, and sharing of children's data in the EU and the UK. what we've seen this year, just in the last few weeks on children's data, is a lot of enforcement activity. So not just the FTC, which has brought quite a number of COPPA cases this year, but also the states, with Texas suing
Yep.
Roku. I believe Michigan sued Roku. Also, we've seen California in their recent case against Sling TV, which dealt with opt-outs, but also had a claim about the failure to provide parental controls and child profiles for users 16 and under who are receiving ads through Sling TV and targeted advertising. So there's just a ton going on. And I was at a conference last week, the FOSI conference, where the current FTC chair, Andrew Ferguson, was speaking. And he basically said, I told the staff to bring me COPPA cases. We're going to enforce COPPA vigorously, and we're going to push it to its limits. So I think on children's data, stay tuned. There are more laws and more enforcement coming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a powerful statement. I'm assuming we'll see a lot of that coming in the next few months. Um, from our perspective, what we've seen, like some interesting non-children data edge cases here is, like I would say health and location, especially those two. Health, I think even in case of Healthline, page
Yeah.
information, product information, things which a health website could have was considered health data. I know there is some case which was brought even for my health, my data, or some enforcement actions there. I'm not sure how that went so far, but I think that we do have the Washington state law for health and then also the broader categorization of health data. And then I think location especially is super interesting because I've seen, because this is a data type that gets collected automatically or is observed. On browsers, you can infer it through IP addresses as well. So we do see that quite a bit of location data collection happening. And then in mobile app, once you, like the bigger problem we've seen is once you allow location data for your own use case, that permission then flows to a lot of other SDKs and including ad SDKs, which leads to location data collection by multiple ad partners through a single mobile app. So I've at least seen those two on our investigations or audits as well with our customers popping up here and there.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would say we deal a little less with health data since we're in the entertainment business, although arguably certain laws that would apply to, for example, collection of steps in a game could be viewed as health data and therefore sensitive data. Location data, particularly precise location, is definitely something that, as you point out, we see a lot of, and we see a lot of enforcement interest in that. Most of my members are not collecting precise geolocation data because they don't need to do so, and we tell them that. Sometimes they'll collect course location, of course, to make sure that settings are correct and to match players up in a tournament. But in general, I think if you think of it as the state laws define it, precise geolocation is something under 1,750 feet. Most of the time, our members do not need that type of information.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like the general guidance is to not have that, right? And then, make exceptions when you really need that kind of data. I think another interesting piece we've seen is dark patterns or, basically like design patterns that have been at least been part of either certain fines or even some sort of legislation going forward. So yeah, just wanted to get some of your thoughts here, Stacey, on what kind of these patterns you look for when you're doing your audits or the kind of controls you are looking at.
Yeah, so this is obviously an issue that has come to prominence, I would say, in the last 10 years. When I was at the FTC, I started looking at this issue as part of international discussions probably nearly a decade ago. And at the time, people were sort of scratching their head. and saying, what is this really? Is it deception? Is it misleading? Is it unfair? And I think that the conversation has somewhat moved on to an understanding that the way that you design your user interface can have important consequences and effects on users' ability to make choices. So in our program requirements in both sets, our general seal requirements and our kids seal requirements, we do prohibit the use of misleading, deceptive practices that I think the official definition is something like obscure or subvert the user's ability to make privacy choices. I would say that there's been a lot of recognition, at least in the video game industry and at least among my members, that they need to make sure that they are designing their user interfaces in a way that does allow consumers to make choices and that doesn't somehow push them into making a privacy invasive choice. It's interesting. I think the former FTC under Chair Khan was very interested in this issue. To me, it's a little unclear how interesting the current commission is in privacy dark patterns. They certainly don't use that term anymore. They use terms like choice architecture. But I do think that this is something that the states have definitely picked up on and will continue to pick up on because it also overlaps not just with privacy law, but with traditional consumer protection law and prohibitions against unfair or deceptive acts or practices, what we call UDAP laws.
Makes complete sense. And what I've observed is this is another practice that, when you start any of your privacy choice implementation is usually consistent, but over time can drift away from your standard preferred legal guidance, either on new websites or because of change of, someone moved away from your marketing team who owns the cookie banner, someone new comes up and thinks about optimizing it a little bit more. So I do think like this generally doesn't happen at the start of an implementation of a cookie banner. It usually happens as time goes, and you basically need good monitoring here to make sure those controls are working. um,
Yeah.
Moving
Just
on. Yeah,
one more note on that, which is to say that the California Consumer Privacy Agency's regulations around dark patterns are actually helpful because they contain examples of prohibited dark patterns, including diagrams. So, when in doubt, there is guidance out there for companies to look at to understand what's meant by this somewhat nebulous term, dark patterns.
absolutely. I also feel that clarity actually is pretty great for organizations because we can build controls around it in a very specific format, like, hey, this is allowed, and at least this we should never see. And then wherever it's the gray area, that's where the legal and privacy teams can give their own guidance as well. I think towards the last, just kind of summarizing, we did talk about a few of those things around GPC, children's data. Uh, I also want to kind of extend this and get your opinion around, like, if you look forward around privacy enforcement, how is that expanding to other surface areas which you do cover, like mobile app, connected TV, game console, or any other device?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. When ESRB started back in 2000, we looked exclusively at websites. And then the name of the game throughout the early 2000s was really mobile apps, corresponding both to the proliferation of mobile apps and increasing regulatory interest in that area. Now, and then I would say by the late 20 teens, we did see the FTC in particular bringing cases involving different, as you say, surfaces. So we saw, for example, the VTech case, which was a COPPA case involving connected toys. We saw Vizio, which was the agency's first smart TV case. So that there were precedents for that, but I think it's not until now that we're seeing a much broader push on the regulatory front in terms of what kinds of products, devices, platforms that they are interested in. So I would say that we've seen this year clearly California's recent Sling TV case. I already mentioned the cases against Roku. So those are two or three cases against streaming platforms. And in what might be, I would call the year of the car, where everyone is
Oh, yes.
realizing that cars are collecting using a lot of data. We saw the FTC's case against GM and its OnStar service for collecting and selling very granular driving data, including precise geolocation, going back to our earlier discussion, and several states following suit, notably Nebraska, also against GM, and Texas, which sued Allstate and its subsidiary Arity
Right.
for collecting and selling driving data. So I think we're going to see much broader enforcement, not just against websites, mobile apps, and I forgot to mention social media platforms, since there's a history of that, but really looking at some of the newer ways where data is being collected and used. I mean, I think the basic takeaway is that privacy enforcers are going where the consumers are and wherever companies are collecting, using, and sharing personal data. So the interfaces are expanding to cover all of those. And that brings, I think, a broader number and range of companies into, they've of course been formally within the scope of the law, but I think it brings them more into the focus of regulators and enforcers.
Yeah. And like the way we typically think about it as well as like if you're, I mean, privacy programs mature over time. So, not everyone, it's like everyone tries to be 100% compliant, but there's so much data everywhere, you try to
Right.
improve it. But at least the way we'll try to think about it, there's like front of the house and, kind of your back office, front office. So your websites, mobile app, TV apps, basically where, as you mentioned, Stacy, things that your consumers are interacting with are also the surface areas where regulators, now I would say litigators, which are equally versed with technology and because they're bringing all these class actions, are actually looking under the hood and trying to figure out, hey, do you violate certain laws? What kind of data you are collecting? And if you, at least like from a prioritization, I would always prioritize to fix those, at least so that, if you are improving your privacy program, maturing it over time, you don't get audited because, there is some obvious mistake on your website and you don't get the time to fix it. So overall, that's typically our suggestion as well. One thing on mobile apps specifically, since we have done quite a bit of work there, is as well as one thing that makes it really challenging for privacy teams, and we'll get into it in the demonstration as well, is while on websites, you can still work with someone internally to say, hey, can you just audit our website? And, they can follow the steps. If they're slightly technical, they can open the cookie jar and see which cookies fire, look at the network traffic, kind of see if the website is complying or not. The hard thing about mobile apps is it is very difficult task to do the same auditing. It's not as easy as right clicking and looking what was happened. You need to set up like proper kind of like network interception. It's like a full infrastructure and it's like very, very difficult to do. So I think that is what, in my opinion, makes mobile app really tricky for privacy teams. On the other hand, what we've kind of started to see on the enforcement side, they have over time build those capabilities or invited folks with capabilities. So they've gotten those capabilities, but internally, it's very hard for privacy teams to build that. So I think that I do feel we haven't seen like on the CCPA side quite a bit of enforcement. I mean, some of that, but I do think as that kind of ramps up, that will be one big challenge because you can't just go back and start auditing your mobile app. That's a bit of a challenge. Um,
Yeah. And I would
awesome.
say that calling out the litigators is interesting because we've seen that in some of these states, that cases that the states have brought, they've actually hired private counsel to pursue the claims. And so I think there are a lot of actors there, lots of eyes now looking on companies, trying to find enforcement actions and to target the worst practices or the things that are the most visible. But they are all increasingly developing their own capacity to look under the hood, so to speak. So it makes having that capability, whether it's through Privado or having an organization like ESRB doing the compliance work, it does make it very important to look at those things that may attract that scrutiny.
Absolutely. Um, Well, thanks for sharing that, Stacy. So, what we're going to do next is we're going to move to a little bit of product demonstration. We did cover quite a bit of topics. As you know, I shift gears, get into the demo. I'll of course ask Stacy to give her opinion since they've kind of used our product quite a bit. Feel free to drop questions as I'm demoing. If you have any questions around the topics as well, around specific law enforcement, yeah, you feel free to put it in Q&A and I'll pick it up, and then we'll also have a dedicated Q&A section towards the end. So,
Great.
and shifting gears on essentially web and app automation. So, how you can kind of leverage technologies like Privado. So I'm going to focus on web since website itself is such a big auditing exercise, and we do make it super easy for companies to do. In fact, the only thing you need to know is the domain and the geographies you want to audit your website from. What Privado really does it, Privado basically acts like a regulator, a litigator, a normal consumer, right? So we're basically become like a shadow user, a mystery shopper, which opens your website and follows the same consent actions that a regulator or a litigator is doing. So we'll open your website. If it's from California, set a GPC signal, open your cookie banner, opt out. If it's from Europe, do the same. Open your website, see if the banner loads, click on reject, accept, withdraw consent, do all those consent actions that a typical auditor is doing. And then what we're doing is we're observing some things, for example, which cookies fired, which SDKs fired on your app, which third-party pixels fired, what data went out. And we combine all of this to do a few things. We are first giving you a list of all the controls that failed on your website, so you can actually go and remediate it. Of course, from an, and Stacey can talk a little bit about that. Like from your perspective, Stacey, you're using it to figure out like, hey, is it compliant or not, and make it part of your program. The second thing we do really help with is website inventory, so or mobile app inventory as well. So once we scan a website, what you really want to know at any point of time is the amount of cookies, who sets those cookies, are those cookies being blocked, are those being correctly categorized? So we help you with that, giving you a true inventory of all the tracking technologies on your website, the location of those tracking technologies, and finally, like take all this, what you really want to do is once we find a privacy issue or a non-compliance, you really want to remediate it as soon as possible. We make that super easy by giving you exact steps we took, the script that is responsible, and how to fix it as well. So we look all of that in the demo. As I'm doing that, Stacy, any high-level thoughts on?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think you're saying it better than I do, but certainly one of the highest uses of using Privado for us is that the automated scans allow us to really quickly get visibility into the network traffic. And we use Privado to generate these very detailed scans that we then incorporate into our own audit processes. One of the things that we really appreciate is the ability to get really in-depth information from the mobile scans, including data elements from both first parties and third parties. So that's a main use that we're using Privado for. I know we might talk a little bit more about opt-outs and things like that, but one of the things that we really appreciate is being able to test compliance with GPC, global privacy control signals, and cookie banner opt-outs in one test. Previously, we went through a multi-step process, and so this really streamlines it for us. As I mentioned, we work with about 40 video game and toy companies, and we're looking at a very wide range of products every single solitary day. So finding ways to supplement the work that we do by using Privado scans is really helping us both get a deeper look and also do it more quickly.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Stacy. Yeah, to just add on to that, like as I said, to begin an audit, all you need is a website. I'm using a website called Privacy Dark Patterns. We own this. We create or replicate all common issues we see typically websites have. As I said, the only thing you really need is the domain. You can add a title, select geographies, say how many pages you want to scan. There are a few more settings there. Um, Once you have that, typically the most important thing we do is like give a compliance score to begin with. So for example, this website has a 27% compliance score, which basically means if you have 100 control, only 27 of them are passing, the rest are all failing, right? So that's the goal for our customers or anyone who's using Privado is to get to as close to 100 as quickly as possible. And that's kind of what we enable as well. So the when we go in, we run a scan. I think the most important page that our customers focus on is this test page. This test page is basically a series of controls that we are validating. Privado does come with a out-of-a-box policy and control library, which is mapped to different state laws, country laws. Depending on what geography you select, we automatically apply policy and controls. Having said that, this is completely configurable, which means if you want to add any custom controls, any custom policies, you can work with our custom account manager to actually enable that as well. So I'm going to look at give you some examples of that. So for example, if when we're scanning from UK, there are certain controls that we're checking. The first one is like, hey, do we even see a banner, right? So we can kind of start from there. So it shows green, which means there are no issues. This control passed. You can see the screenshot that we saw when the website was opened. So this is kind of, you can see accept all cookie settings. There's no reject button. So you will see an issue for that as I go forward. Um, and then it is testing for different things. So when we are checking for UK, we're checking for if a user takes no action, then are cookies firing, are non-essential cookies firing, same for network request. The same then are reapplied for reject all. So if a user rejects all, what happens? Typically to do that, you have to spend a lot of time figuring it out. The same thing we do for California. So when we are picking California, our focus is on two types. One is either we are opting out using a global privacy control or using the banner. So for example, when a user sets global privacy control and we open the website, we see about 9 issues related to pixels. These are different advertising pixels that are firing on the website when even if a user has opted out using global privacy control. So the main advantage is what you really want to do is you want to reach a point where you have an issue where you can send it to your website developer or marketing owner directly. We do allow that to be sent from here. We have a guide, like a description on what control was applied, what the guidance is. We also tell the script responsible for it. So this is all because of a Google Tag Manager misconfiguration. So typically, if you want to fix this issue, you want to talk to your GTM team. We do provide detailed initiator chain. This is something that your GTM team or your marketing team will appreciate, where they know, oh, actually, Privado knows that when the website loaded, Google Tag Manager loaded, which loaded this pixel. And if you want to fix this privacy issue, this non-compliance, we need to go to Google Tag Manager to fix it. So this entire process of simplifying the results back to a script on the page really helps our teams because they don't need to like chase people. They just know who to speak to fix these issues.
Yeah,
Um,
and I would say that that is something that's very helpful for us, for example, with Google, being able to see very quickly whether whether personalized ads are enabled or non-personal or disabled is something that we've relied on a lot to get just a very quick sense. We're kind of an unusual user. We're taking the results that Privado has and incorporating them into our own reports, compliance reports that we do for our members. But all of this information that is in the Privado dashboard is is part of the basis of where we're doing our analysis.
Absolutely. And this was basically the check that Stacy was mentioning. So for example, Google rolled out the Google consent mode. What you really want to make sure is if Google has a consent mode, you're passing the right privacy flags. For example, even with the Google privacy control on, we are still passing NPA as 0 in this specific call where it should be 1. So that's like a good example of, hey, we caught like a bad consent signal being sent, which means like, of course, Google is off the hook because they don't know if the user has consented or not. You have to send the right consent signals. And what has happened over time is it started with Google, then Microsoft and Amazon both have their own consent modes. So eventually, like, you will see all these bigger platforms give the accountability back to you because they still want to run on your website, and your marketing team would want so that you get some attribution. Then you have to run these advanced checks. So this was an example of that. We did talk about a bunch of things. So the the one simple was this cookie uncategorized. So this is another thing we see quite a bit. So on this website, for example, in UK, there are basically a bunch of cookies that have not been categorized at all. So we see that quite a bit, like, your website changes, cookies changes, and we flag that. So we see like this cookie is set by this domain and is uncategorized in the CMP. So we pick that information up as well. So your transparency requirements are there. Expiry check, if there is something with more than 13 months expiry, then we pick that up and report it back to you. So there are two cookies which have 400 days expiry. Consent mode we looked at. We also look at dark patterns. So we look at, for example, if is there a reject button or not. So we already looked at the CMP banner from UK. It didn't have a reject button. It only had accept and cookie settings. So that's an example of picking up on that dark pattern. Uh,
Yeah,
Again, like,
the symmetry in the buttons, which is something that California has really been pushing.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, yeah, and there are a bunch of questions. So thanks for asking that. We will kind of add those. So I'll keep answering that. So yeah, these are some of the checks, as I mentioned. For UK, it's all related to consent. The primary check, the same for California. Then we have some dark pattern checks. There's a question around like how can we make the dark pattern checks objective? Some of them might not be. Uh, and then can a human review it? So what we've done so far is we've basically mostly relied on what is pretty objective, as kind of Stacy also mentioned. So for example, asymmetry, that's easy to do. So a button color contrast check is easy to flag. Like whenever we see there is, something is green and something is white, that's something we can immediately highlight. And if that is something that is objective and we have added, the subjective piece, thanks for asking that question, is some which we cover as a custom policy where you can define your own company's like standards and we can encode them and check for those. So we only look for like two things which are truly objective for now, and then we allow companies to define their own customization as well. Awesome. So here are some of the, as I said, some of the bigger tests that we kind of focus on. Again, the goal is if you are a company, you want to minimize these tests. Another thing that we do really help you with is and this is the last one on the website, and we'll try to also see if we can show something on the mobile app side, is CMP script check. So this is your own audit of your own cookie banner. You would be surprised how often the biggest problem we see is missing cookie banner script on the page. So the first check looks for that. It's all green. We did see that. The second one we see is a timing check. Timing check looks for if you have a third-party script firing before your cookie banner, then that's a problem. That's something you want to minimize. So for example, in this case, all these scripts like Spotify, TikTok are firing before the cookie banner is firing, which basically means you can buy any cookie banner technology. None of these issues will go away because you have implemented it wrong. So a lot of time these implementations are a problem. So for example, we'll tell you, you have a TikTok pixel. This is loaded on position number 14 on this time. And it's actually firing 0 millisecond before, which basically means exactly at the same time, which means your cookie banner will not be able to block it. You really need it to fire after. So that's kind of very important. A lot of time these edge conditions lead to all these issues. And there was a corresponding issue for this pixel as well. So yeah, this is on the test side of the house. I will quickly show you a few things and then we'll look at really quickly on mobile app as well. In terms of cookies, I think this is another part our companies use us quite a lot of is what cookies are on your website, which pages are they part of. While you can easily see the domain of the cookie, but what's very hard to get is the source. So we do a really great job at kind of resolving cookie to a kind of a source. For example, this TTP cookie is a first party cookie, which means if you were looking at the result, you can never tell if it was from TikTok. But if you look at the source, you can see this is from TikTok. You can also see the vendor is TikTok here. So again, this is super interesting for our customers to actually use us to figure out who's setting which cookie. And finally, like a flow graph. So this would be the last thing I would conclude on is like getting this fourth party tag piggybacking use case. How are these tags finding on your website? Is it by you? Is it by some other vendor? So how can you like have that control is by a nice view like this. So you can say, okay, I want to really know how Spotify is firing on our page. And you can double click and see Google Tag Manager tag added, which fires Spotify, right? So you get that entire journey. You also get that journey for cookies. So you can do the same where, of course, you have everything. I can just go and say only for opt-out GPC. And then, you have a bunch of cookies. And then finally, you can say, oh, I want to know how this TTP cookie fires. And then it will show you the entire journey, right? So dark pattern, GTM, TikTok pixel, one TikTok pixel, another TikTok pixel finally sets the cookie. So you get this entire flow diagram, really helps you have that conversation. Um, and then I'm going to quickly move, since there were questions about mobile app, and give you a quick example of what kind of tests are there on mobile app and what all you can see. So resharing my screen really quickly. Awesome. In case of mobile app, again, you have similar tests that depending on what geographies you're running. If you're running from California, you're running for kind of your opt-out test. If you're running from California, Europe, you're running for the opt-in test. Then we also have data element level tests. So if sensitive data is going out, video data is going out, we give you a list of all the SDKs, which all SDKs are on your website, a list of all the mobile app, a list of all the third parties. So for example, these are all SDKs in this Solitaire app. The unique part in both our website and app offering is also telling you what data goes out of the app, right? So for example, in this specific mobile app, email address gets collected and sent to basically Google, and these are all the values of that. Or ad ID goes to a bunch of third parties, including Singular, Wongle, and all of that is available. So I know there was a question around mobile app. So mobile app has a bunch of tests. Some of them are related to SDKs. Data sharing is a big one, and then consent is another one. Uh, yeah, as I kind of mentioned earlier as well, mobile apps are harder to test. So that's where we need to run these simulations and build that up. But yeah, these are some of the tests available. In case of window games is something that we don't have a native support on, which means you can't actually upload a window game and do the test directly on Privado. But there are some offline tests that our team can run and get to the same maturity, but it's not just available through UI. We also have a static scanning capability, which can do something similar, but in our experience on user-facing interfaces, you do need to run dynamic scans because a lot of things happens as you kind of test things. And yeah, that's basically the Privado demonstration. There's quite a bit of information there, and I do want to open it up for questions. I know Stacy, you were mentioning something, so yeah, go ahead. And yeah, anyone who has questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section. I'll pick them up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think one of the benefits for us has not been just all of this information, but the team's willingness to develop new tools. And I know you just announced some new tools today, but sometimes we're asking for very specific things. Can you do this? Can you do that? And working with our account manager, Patrick, has really been great because I know he's taken some of our suggestions about the things we'd like to see back, and you've put them into your roadmap. So I think that goes to your point that you're saying that things are not static because the technology is changing, because the requirements are changing. you need to constantly be iterating on this tool, and we need you to be constantly iterating on this tool as well as the other tools that we use. So it's a really good thing, and I do want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. And there are a few more questions. Please keep them coming. So, to answer Steve, your question, what do we need in order to test a mobile app? We just need for Android, we need APK file. For iOS, we need IPA file. On Android, soon we will go get away from the limitation of needing APK and allow our customers, and that's been a requirement because working with the ESRB team to just give us a Play Store link and start from there. In case of iOS, it is a little difficult. Apple is a little more closed in that sense. So we might not be able to do the same for Apple. But if you have the IPA, which if you have built an app, you should. That's all we need. We don't need any server access. These are all publicly available files. There's no source code there. These are compiled files. So there's very little, I would say, like customer code that can ever be in APK or IPA because anyone can download it and analyze your apps. Regulators can also do the same. So that's kind of what we need. No server access, really. Um, but thanks for us asking that question. Yeah, I mean, there's a good thought around less of a question, but yeah, I'll still field it to you, Stacy. Around the question is really about like issues related to cars and IoT, and kind of what kind of issues are there, and yeah, if you have any high level thoughts there.
Yeah. So, whoops, I think I froze for a minute. Yeah, there are a lot of issues emerging. Most of them have been so far, at least the enforcement cases, have really focused on the fact that consumers just don't know that this is going on and that there really hasn't been sufficient notice or any attempt to obtain consent. There was a lot of this was kicked off by a New York Times reporter who found that her insurance rates had been raised, and she couldn't figure out why. And then she did an investigation, and it turned out that the car companies were collecting a lot of very granular data, including how hard you brake, the hours that you're driving, how fast you're driving. Not things that we would necessarily think of as personal data, but then when combined with identifiers become personal data. So the enforcement activity, at least to date, has really just focused on the fact that this is happening and people did not know about it at all. But I suspect that we'll see more sophisticated enforcement issues come as companies start to disclose this information, and then there'll be some questions again about what's being disclosed, not being disclosed, whether practices are deceptive, whether they're unfair, whether they violate very technical, comprehensive, or specific privacy laws. So you can imagine there's a lot of information that can be collected in a car. And as cars also integrate infotainment systems and are collecting voice data and preferences, they're just a huge privacy mine, for lack of a better term. So I think there'll be a lot coming.
Yeah, I also find a last thought from me on that front was what I found interesting was conversations around having some sort of whistleblower program I think that was in the new CCPA or CPRA requirements around having some sort of whistleblower protection or allowing people to report back on violation. So I do think like the more people are looking on the front, kind of like a front office and self-auditing, that also opens up a can of worm on practices like this, where someone can actually report, and that might open a lot more on the car and the IoT side, where it's really hard to actually figure that out, or, unless harm happened and someone investigated that. So I think I found that interesting as well. I know we are on time, so I do want to thank everyone who attended the webinar and asked great questions. I do want to thank Stacy for staying with us, answering all the questions, and being open about your use of Privado, and sharing all your information. Yeah, over to you, Stacy and Ben.
Yeah, just thanks so much for having me. Anyone can contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at esrb.org/privacy. And I'm always happy to chat privacy with anybody who wants to.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacy and Vaibhav. Just one more plug. So we have our last webinar of the year coming up on December 10th. So we thought it would be a good time to review all the regulatory changes from this year and what to expect next year in 2026. So we have two lawyers from DBR Tech Law, Daniel Rosenzweig and Miles Light, to go through all of these key changes from last year and really get you prepared for next year in terms of all these new requirements. This session will also count for IAPP CPE credit. So please register. And otherwise, thanks again for your attendance today. And thanks again to Stacy and Vaibhav.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.